Time for everything. So I want to welcome you this afternoon. I swear I've been awake for several hours. And I would like us all to join in prayer with our friend Brenda from the Baha'i Center of Waco. Baha'i Center?
Yes.
Yes.
O thou kind Lord, thou hast created all humanity from the same stock. Thou hast decreed that all shall belong to the same household. In thy holy presence, they are all thy servants, and all mankind are sheltered beneath thy tabernacle. All have gathered together at thy table of bounty. All are illumined through the light of thy providence. O God, O thou who art kind to all, thou hast provided to all, doth shelter all, conferrest life upon all. Thou hast endowed each and all with talents and faculties, and all are submerged in the ocean of thy mercy. O thou kind Lord, unite all. Let the religions agree and make the nations one, so that they may see each other as one family and the whole earth as one home. May they all live together in perfect harmony. O God, raise aloft the banner of the oneness of mankind. O God, establish the most great peace. Cement thou, O God, the hearts together. O thou kind Father God, gladden our hearts through the fragrance of thy love. Brighten our eyes through the light of thy guidance. Delight our ears with the melody of thy word, and shelter us all in the stronghold of thy providence. Thou art the mighty and the powerful. Thou art the forgiving, and thou art the one who overseeth the shortcomings of all mankind.
Thank you so much. That's Brenda Cozine. She's also the treasurer for the Greater Waco Interfaith Conference. And I'd like now to introduce myself. I am Chris Cervantes. I am the unofficial secretary of the board, and I'm a former president of the Interfaith Conference. And I'd like to welcome at this time our current president, Alec Ulitalo, to say a few words about our organization.
Good afternoon, not morning. And welcome. It is a joy to have you all with us this afternoon. A little bit about the Waco Interfaith Council. Well, first of all, I'm Alec Ulitalo, as Chris mentioned. I'm senior minister at Richfield Christian Church, a Disciples of Christ congregation over on Cobb's Drive. The purpose of the Greater Waco Interfaith Conference is to promote harmony, understanding, cooperation, and respect among the variety of faith traditions in Waco and the surrounding areas. That is our official About Us statement. That is who we proclaim to be and who we are attempting to be, let's say, as we try to bring together all of the varying faiths that reside within Waco and its surrounding areas. I know that not all will be represented here this afternoon. This is who we could find that would be willing and able participants in this wonderful endeavor. The Greater Waco Interfaith Conference is led by a board that consists, how many are we at right now? Do you have any idea?
12 to 15.
Around 12 to 15 members of varying faiths from The faiths that are represented here today, I think that's probably all of the faiths.
Nope, we have Jain and Hindu as well.
Oh yes, Kirit couldn't make it today. Jain and Hinduism as well. And we meet every other month as a board, and our goals most of the time are to plan 4 differing events throughout the year. Of course, this one, as well as an interfaith Thanksgiving service, a Festival of Faiths in August, September, as well as Yom HaShoah, the Holocaust Remembrance service that will be coming up in a few months as well. If you are interested in the things that we are doing here, if you are intrigued by possibly becoming a board member, you are more than welcome to come to one of those board meetings. We meet every other month on the second Wednesday at noon at Providence. It's the exact opposite side of Providence from where we are right now in the administrative building near their boardroom. If you would like more information, you can talk to any of the people that Chris just introduced, or any of our panel members. Not all of our panel members are board members, but I'm sure they would love to talk to you as well. Again, welcome. It is wonderful to have you.
Thank you. Thank you, Alec. So if you've been to a World Religion Day panel before, you know that generally speaking, we have our panelists sit up at 2 tables, and we have a microphone that we pass down, and each of them answers a few questions about a topic from the perspective of their own faith or faith movement. Today, we're going to do something slightly different. Our topic today, as you may have seen in some of the materials that have gone out, is the struggle to overcome evil. And so what we're going to do today is give each panelist, each of us are from different churches, temples, synagogues, and homes. We're each going to have a chance to come up here and speak for 5 minutes about looking at evil through the lens of our own faith. How do we define evil? What tools do our religions and faiths give us to struggle with evil, and things along those lines. And so we'll do that. Once that's all done, all 8 of us have talked, and we'll be really entertaining, I promise. Right, guys? Once that's done, we're going to take a short break and get a few more refreshments, and also feel free to get refreshments at any time. Just wander over there. You're all grown-ups. There's also restrooms straight across the hall. So once that's done, we're going to change things up again, and our panelists, let's see, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, perfect, 8 tables. We're each going to come to a table. So for instance, I'm going to come and sit at this front table and talk to these lovely people. I've got a few little conversation starter cheat sheets, and Alec might go to the next table, and then our friend Paul might go there, etc., all the way around the room. We'll talk with you guys for a little bit. It's just a conversation, like what did you learn, or what do you want to know more about, or what challenged you, or what are your thoughts on evil? And we'll do that for a few minutes, and then I'll come up here and make some kind of noise or announcement, and the panelists will switch, and we'll go to the next table. So you'll get a chance to talk to at least 2 to 3 panelists on a sort of conversational, individual basis, and I'm really looking forward to that and to the relationships that can begin to develop there. I'll remind us of this before we start that portion of the program, but one of the things that interfaith dialogue is building relationship. You cannot see a person as other whom you have sat across the table from and had a conversation with and learned about. And so when we come together, we'll do so with a sense of curiosity and a sense of listening and speaking only from our own point of view. We're not here to do any kind of conversion. We're not, as I said before, we're all grown-ups. Most of us have our own faith path, and if you don't, this is a great place to learn about several others. But we're just here to be curious and build relationships, because if there's anything that we can get out of this Greater Waco Interfaith Conference and out of these kind of events, it's new friends and new relationships. So, without any further ado, I would like to welcome Margot Ford, who is the Reverend at the Unity Center of Greater Waco, and she is going to kick us off.
Thank you, Chris. It's good to see so many of you here today, to know that you are interested in learning about the different faith traditions that are represented in this room, represented in the Waco area. As Chris mentioned, I am one of the pastors at Unity Spiritual Center of Waco. We are located in Hewitt. We are a small, intimate family, and we always invite you to join us for a service on Sunday mornings if you are so inclined. I thought it probably would be a good idea to tell you a little bit about what unity is first, and then address the idea of how unity sees evil. Unity is a spiritual movement based on the teachings of Jesus and the power of prayer, offering a unique, positive, practical, and progressive approach to Christianity. In Unity, we believe that all people are created with sacred worth, regardless of ethnicity, culture, lifestyle, or creed. So we embrace all people and believe that neither God nor unity leave anyone out. So let me address a little bit about what unity believes regarding evil. First of all, unity believes that there is only one presence and one power in the universe. And we say that that is God, the good, omnipotent. Sometimes we say OPOPGGO. God, one presence, one power, God, the good, omnipotent. In other words, we do not believe that there is an evil entity such as a Satan or a devil fighting with God for the control of our souls. So evil then, Unity's founders did not believe in evil per se. Charles Fillmore, who was a co-founder of Unity, wrote in the book Christian Healing, "If we think that evil exists as a power in the world, that it is working in our lives and in the lives of those about us, we make it an active force, and it appears to be all that we imagine it. Be wise, pronounce nothing evil, and only good will come. Evil is the subjective label we give to events we do not understand, and is usually the result of humans misusing their God-given powers. Evil does not endure." Charles Fillmore, in the book Revealing Word, goes on to say about evil. He says, while there is but one presence and one power, God, humans have the privilege and freedom of using the power as they will. When we misuse it, we bring about inharmonious conditions. These are called evil. Evil appears in the world because people are not in spiritual understanding. We have not learned that all is God. All is God mind. Neither have we conformed to the law of mind, with the results that inharmony appears in our body and in our affairs. We can do away with evil by learning rightly to use the one power. If there were a power of evil, that could not be changed. Evil is a parasite. It has no permanent life of itself. Its whole existence depends on the life it borrows from its parent, and when its connection with the parent is severed, nothing remains. In divine mind, there is no recognition of evil conditions. Such conditions have no basis in reality. They are conjurations of a false consciousness. Apparent evil is the result of ignorance, and when truth is presented, the error disappears. And this is what's said about overcoming evil. Evil must be overcome with good. We must dwell in the good so wholly that the substance of our thought and our being is given over to the promotion of the good. This is a mental process in which all negation or evil is denied, and creative, fearless affirmations of God's perfect good is steadfastly adhered to. So I will be glad to talk more about that to any of you with whom I sit this afternoon.
That's exactly 5 minutes. Good job.
And I'd like to now invite Wally Carter from the Baha'i Center, the Baha'i Center of Waco to come forward and talk about his faith movement's perspective.
Good afternoon. I'm glad to have come after the Unity description of evil, because it is very closely aligned with the Baha'i faith sort of views on evil. But the first perspective is that the entire universe is made up of just all these elemental substances, both material and intelligible, but that it is all good. It is all good. In the Baha'i faith, it is mentioned that all the atoms of the universe are there for our training. So the universe itself is the great gymnasium by which we are to exercise what? That free will. And that the human being is endowed with all the attributes and names of God potentially within there. Whereas the universe itself, every single thing is reflective at least of one of the names and attributes of God. So you see, there is that sort of connection of those things of it's God. It's the oneness of God, and that is the purpose, is how we draw closer to Him. He has endowed us with two main capacities, knowing and loving. And those two are drives within the human soul, but for the purpose of to know God and to love Him. Now, we in this big gymnasium, this exercise universe that we're in, we could be lost in a number of ways. The interconnection of all those good things, but in relationship to one another, might have something sort of an impact that is looked at as evil, especially when man engages in that same universe. So a loving God gives by His grace the pathways by which to win through all this in order to know Him more and to love Him more. So what is embedded in the very soul of man is this twofold nature. And the soul itself is empowered with an awful lot. I mean, it is empowered. It's in the direction that it turns that something can be regarded as evil or as good. But, in this day and age, the main thing is that good somehow is endowed with a particular power. It is endowed with a particular consequence that is disproportionate to what the event is. The cause has a disproportionate kind of effect. Whereas evil, like was mentioned before, evil depends on just some, it springs up, and it's that insistent self. That insistent self that says, I want this. And that want, or whatever one believes to be the need, is contrary to what God's express will is, vis-a-vis the religions that we all are aware of. And if we live by those religions, and there's such a common foundation with all of them, if we lived by those, then that good would definitely, in this day in particular, represent itself or show itself in consequences that are far greater than what has been in the past. One of the things that we have seen in the 20th century is that there has been this, horrendous evil, never before seen, but also an amazing collection, aggregate of unities, various unities that have never been witnessed before in the past history. So that I'll leave you with that because I know that's an awful lot to take. And but anyway, we'll like the person said before, be glad to talk about it further at the table and further discussions. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Perfect. I guess we could applaud them. All right, if I could invite Susan Gutierrez to come forward and give us a Buddhist perspective.
Hi, Susan Hutera. I'm just a layperson, but the kind of Buddhism we practice is a Chinese practice, and so it incorporates Taoism and Confucianism into it. Now that's very conflicting actually, because Buddha pretty much talks about living the right life and disengaging from the bad things and focus on just living your own self, living your own life in the right way, okay? Lao Tzu, on the other hand, he takes a little bit different perspective. If you've read the Tao Te Ching, he basically says there is no right or wrong, there just is, okay? Which is kind of conflicting in the fact that I have read a book on Taoist afterlife, and apparently there are repercussions to not living well in this life, even in the Taoist path. And then the teacher that I follow, Wang Lo Sin Si, actually comes primarily from the Confucius path. And he does argue that there is bad and there is good, okay? And that we need to focus on the good. What he has said is if you're confronted with evil, then what you want to do is don't try to push back on it, because then you just get into a battle with evil. But that what you do instead is you center yourself, you focus on your Dantian, you open your heart, and you be love. And it's actually an incredible feeling when you do it. It's a kind of an energy form of meditation where you're really just feeling your own energy inside, and that you can draw upon all this love which is a part of you, because inherently we are good and energies are good. Now, someone had said that, yeah, there are people who take power that they have and they use it in wrong ways. And just a little bit of personal stuff. I got involved in Los Angeles with some people who were practicing something that could not be defined as anything good, but I didn't know any better. And as a result of that, I was being controlled. And I went searching for answers. I went to the TM people, and I didn't really get answers there. But then I found someone who was practicing Taoist meditation in Los Angeles, and the first thing she says is, oh no, if they're trying to control you, it's not a good path. Get out of there right now. Get away from those people, okay? Which I did. And then I started practicing with the teacher, Leong Tan, who taught me how to meditate, find myself, and use my own energies for good. Now, I've probably gone cleared off my notes here, but let me pull them back out. Okay, so let's talk about what evil actually is. It's willfully doing harm to others. There are people who do bad things. They aren't necessarily evil, okay? They just don't know any better. But there are those who know very well what they're doing. And one of the things that we do learn, and it's both in Buddhism and in Confucianism, is there is such a thing as karma, and it will come back to them. It's not necessarily your responsibility to try to punish them in this life, because they will, in their rebirth, because we do believe in reincarnation, in their rebirth, they will pay dearly, okay? But one of the things that we are taught in terms of living the right way is that you should always do something. Okay? Now, it doesn't necessarily mean confronting something face to face, all right? But you need to do something and make a change, whether it's a donation to an organization that is fighting for good against a cause, something, okay? Now, I thought I was going to be thrown out of the Waco Public Library because I confronted somebody who walked into the children's book section and started spouting some things about the Koran that were just absolutely not true. Now, I'm not saying the man was evil, but I'm just saying is, I'd had it. I just said, excuse me, sir. Okay, and I took it on, and I talked about the GWIC, and I talked about the people that I knew who were Muslim, and that I thought what he was spewing was hatred. Okay, and so sometimes, yes, you have to put yourself in that position, and I really didn't know whether someone was going to come and ask me. I didn't realize he was a donor of the public library when I started that conversation with him. Okay, but sometimes, like I said, this is about doing the right thing, and just knowing that you have to do the right thing, even in the adversity of someone who might be spewing hate or who might be doing something evil. Just do the right thing, okay? And then, let's see, am I running out of time? Okay. So anyway, and then the other thing is forgiveness, and this has to do with detachment. You have to detach, you have to forgive, because it's only about what you can do. Anyway, okay.
I invite forward Emily Snyder, who is going to talk to us from the Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints perspective. Our first time, and we're very excited.
She says first time because I moved here from New York City, where these conversations happened a lot in my world, and was very anxious to be part of this. And so voted that the Church of Jesus Christ Latter-day Saints was joining the team. So here we are. What a beautiful topic. Like, I'm so delighted that this is the topic we're talking about. So as members of the Church of Jesus Christ Latter-day Saints, oftentimes referred to as the Mormons, we believe in the Bible, in the King James Bible. And I want to read from Luke, which for me has been a big part of this conversation for me. And this is where Jesus Christ has fasted for 40 days, and he is being confronted by the devil and by Satan. After being 40 days tempted of the devil, and in those days he did eat nothing, and when they were ended, he afterward hungered. So he's so hungry. The devil said unto him, If thou be the Son of God, command this stone that it may make bread. Jesus answered him, saying, It is written that men shall not live by bread alone, but by every word of God. Then the devil, taking him up onto the high mountain, so that's one first temptation, taking him up into a high mountain, showed unto him all the kingdoms of the world. Moment of time, and the devil said unto him, All this power will I give thee, and the glory of them, for that is delivered unto me. And so says, If thou wilt worship me, and all this will be thine. So says, all of this kingdom I have control over, and I'll give it to you. And Jesus says, Satan, get thee behind me. And then Satan brought him to Jerusalem and set him on a pinnacle over of the temple, and said unto him, If thou be the Son of God, cast thyself down from hence. For it is written, so this is Satan saying, supposedly, you have charge over the angels. And then Jesus answered, saying, Thou shalt not tempt the Lord thy God. And when the devil had ended all the temptation, he departed from Jesus for a season. Obviously, if you can't tell, we believe that Satan exists. And is a being. We believe, to take it further into the eternities or prior eternities, we believe in what we call a plan of salvation, and we believe that Satan was equal to the power of Jesus Christ, and that Satan wanted to have all power and control the agency of man. We believe that Jesus Christ wanted to have individuals and mankind get to choose and get to figure out. And I loved the concept of this is a gymnasium, a practice arena. Mm-hmm. And that's exactly how we view it, that this earth life experience is a practice field, and we get to determine for ourselves the decisions we want to make. For us, earth life is about having a body, that we believe we have our spirits before we came to earth, that we will continue after we live on this earth. But this time was when we became humans and gained a body. So for me, these verses are so powerful because it talks about the humanness of us. That I love the idea that there is no God, there is no evil in my world, and I will just speak as Emily, that evilness comes from the body aspect, that the desires of the flesh, the desires of power and greed, and the desire to prove that power, that's all exemplified in these scriptures with Jesus Christ, of Satan tempting him to eat, tempting him to have the angels and exert his power selfishly, and then to have glory and kingdom. And that those three things, when they are wielded incorrectly, lead us to an evil spot. And that overridingly, as we overcome that, and as we then, the church has provided a number of guidelines for us to help in that. We have a word of wisdom to help with what we eat, to kind of give guidelines to what we eat, what we partake of, a kind of sexual code of conduct, so that we are in a spot where our body, I get to choose what's happening with my body, and I don't just kind of get lost into maybe that's what the social norms are, or that's what I'm addicted to in this season. Our word of wisdom doesn't talk about sugar, but I talk about sugar, because I realize that sugar for me is one of those things that I can just keep going. It's like with the Lay's potato chip thing. You can't just eat one. I don't want to be in that space. I want to be in a space where I am conscious and choosing and in control of my destiny, and not letting the other forces of the world control me. When that gets to interacting with individuals, for me, the whole plan of salvation, the whole concept of having this body to come practice in, is to then figure out, how does my mind match the mind of God? How does my heart then match the heart of God? I want to practice, I want to engage in situations where I'm practicing developing the mind of God, the heart of God, the vision of God, so that, because for me, that is the end goal, is to become as God is. We believe that that is a true reality and that is literal, but for here and now, that is a very emotional thing for me, that I can engage in scenarios with people that have angst about a situation or feelings, and take I love that beautiful Buddhist philosophy of just being grounded and taking a step back and recognizing what's really going on. For me, I found beauty in, there is always a why. People, I've found, don't make decisions out of complete chaos. I don't think anybody wakes up with the desire to be evil, but that they have situations that have arisen in their life that have led them to feel like that is their only tool. And so how can I get into a spot of the curiosity, just as why we're all here, of trying to understand what has happened that has gotten them to this point where they feel like that is the answer and that is their only option to go forward. I get really emotional. I think this in of itself is such a powerful place to overcome evil, to engage in the conversations of understanding and compassion, and to practice and redefine for myself individually what evil is and how to have better tools to confront that, to understand more of what I personally believe, so that I am more grounded in that as I then encounter the world around me.
I'd like to welcome Al Sadiq from the Islamic Center of Waco.
Good afternoon. Shalom and Assalamu alaikum. My name is Al Sadiq. Like Chris said, I'm a president of Islamic Center of Waco. When we talk about Satan, or Shaitan you say in Arabic, he's the most blamed individual from human being. Instead of taking charge of our own life, we always blame Satan. There's a concept of Satan in Islam, but as a human being, we are created to make mistakes. And the Satan exists in us, and the God exists in us. So God has given us a free will, how you act and behave. We always blame our shortcoming on Satan or Shaitan. So how do we overcome our own shortcoming instead of blaming someone else? So when you do, it doesn't mean if somebody, because if you look around this world, there's all kind of beliefs and all kind of practice. To the drug dealer, he's doing a business. It doesn't matter to him. to us is a Satan word. Who are we to dictate him? In his word, he's doing the right thing. So who tells him? So what we do, we go back to our own books. What is right? What is wrong? Let's quit blaming the Satan for our shortcoming. And I'm going to end up here because I don't know how to describe the Satan. Because like I said, the God exists in you and the Satan exists in you. If you act like a Satan, you will be Satan. If you act like a God, you will be a God. So I'm going to end up here. Thank you.
Short and sweet. And I'm going to go next. And I'm going to take my timer.
Take your time or your timer?
Timer.
I'm going to take my time.
Luckily, I talk fast. So I'm a Unitarian Universalist, and Unitarian Universalism is a faith of shared values and principles rather than a single creed or dogma or certain scripture. And so we have members who are Christian, we have members who are Buddhist, atheist, agnostic, humanist, you name it, we've got those members. Basically, if you share our values of inclusion, compassion, spiritual growth, inquiry, celebration, then you'd probably be at home in our congregations. So as far as evil goes, I want to start with a quote from Alexander Solzhenitsyn, who said, "If only there were evil people somewhere committing insidious evil deeds, and it were necessary only to separate them from the rest of us and destroy them. But the line dividing good and evil cuts through the heart of every human being. And who is willing to destroy a piece of their own heart?" For Unitarian Universalists, evil is a rare topic of conversation. As a modern faith movement, our roots are firmly embedded in early ideas from the Enlightenment, reason, rationality, and we also have from our Universalist heritage the belief in the inherent worthiness and salvation of every human soul. We believe that every person is worthy of love, worthy of saving, and worthy of respect. Our Universalist ancestors gave us this idea of a world without hell, and so maybe that's when we stopped talking about evil so much. UU minister named Eric Walker Wickstrom wrote, "If you take away hell, perhaps the idea of evil doesn't make quite so much sense because there's nowhere to put it." But in recent years, we've begun to examine the planks in our own eyes, and we've seen our own issues as a faith movement. And like every other religious movement does, we've had to confront the fact that it isn't enough to just focus on the ways that humans are good and worthy and wonderful. Because as Solzhenitsyn pointed out, the line between good and evil dwells in each of us. So as powerful as our capacity for good is, that's how powerful our capacity for evil is. And we see this not only in individuals who commit acts of evil, but in the structures that we build together. These, when they are used for evil, not only magnify evil, but codify it, enshrining it in law and culture, and making it almost impossible to attack. I'm going to give an example, because that's a pretty abstract idea. So we know that a person, an individual who murders another, has done evil. The victim has been denied power and been humiliated, injured, and killed. On a different scale, we know that, for instance, racism is evil. We know that its victims are denied power, humiliated, injured, and often killed. Victims of racism, though, they're not only killed by the lynching tree and the angry mob, but by institutions such as, for instance, a for-profit healthcare system in which there's a price placed on medical care, and non-white Americans are statistically less able to afford it. So life expectancy for white Americans is 4 years longer than for non-whites. Preventable and treatable disease rates are highest among Black and Latino populations, and this information is all based on a 2017 report from the CDC. So it's easy to point to evil, including my example of racism. You can think of others on your own. It's easy to point to it and say, it's outside us. I'm not a racist. My, church isn't racist. My country isn't racist. When we see or hear about an act of disturbing wrongness, something that we would refer to as evil, an act which profoundly subverts the flourishing of the human, We respond most often by naming that person and that act as evil, and therefore different from us, outside of us. But returning again to Eric Walker Wickstrom, he writes, "That's the problem of evil. Not so much that it exists, in that it's really a fact of life or a force of nature. We know that. The problem of evil, as I see it, is that we are so readily tempted to imagine that it's out there, separated from us in here, that it belongs to them, not us. And that, I believe, is ultimately the root and the design of evil, to make us categorize the world into us and them rather than recognizing our common kinship." Back to me talking. For modern UUs, evil is not a supernatural force endlessly battling the forces of good for cosmic supremacy. As UU minister and author Paul Razor writes, evil is neither a demonic spirit nor a philosophical dilemma, but a reality to respond to and to confront. To place evil squarely in the realm of the mundane and the entirely human is both frightening and liberating. It's frightening because it recognizes that we engage in the hard work of self-examination and that we recognize our own capacity and complicity in evil, if not on the individual scale, then in our communities, cultures, and relationships. It is liberating, however, to see evil as a human-scale problem because that means that we can apply human-scale solutions to it. Unitarian Universalists are deeply invested in this work, and the tools that we have to overcome evil are the same that you've heard and seen throughout this conversation: love, compassion, dedication, and the steady belief in the inherent worth and dignity of every person. And at this time, I'd like to invite forth, let's see, who I have next. Paul Dreisensen. Did I pronounce it right?
Close.
I was close. I tried so hard.
Not that I know who you meant.
It was a Paul part today, so there's a Paul.
My name is Paul Dreisensen, and I am a lay member of Temple Rodef Shalom, which is the Reformed Synagogue here in Waco. So, after 9/11, the question most often asked was, why do they hate us? The reason for the question and the failure to find answers was that we in the West had forgotten the concept of an enemy. Politics and economics create a certain kind of society, a specific way of thinking, and a characteristic type of personality. At their heart is the concept of the rational actor, the person who judges acts by their consequences and chooses the maximal option. He or she believes that for every problem there isn't a solution, for every conflict a resolution. The way to achieve it is to sit down, negotiate, and on balance do what is best for all. In such a world there are no enemies, merely conflicts of interest. An enemy is simply a friend we hadn't done enough for yet. In the real world, however, an enemy is someone who is willing to die in order to kill you. And while it is true that the enemy always hates us for a reason, it is his reason and not ours. He sees a different world from ours, and in that world, we are the enemy. Why do they hate us? They hate us because we are the enemy. It can become mind-blinding thinking that the way we see things is the only way, or at least that is the way that everyone would choose if given the chance. Only a complete failure to understand the history of ideas can explain this error, and it is a dangerous one. Not everyone sees the world the way we do, or as Richard Weaver once said, the trouble with humanity is that it forgets to read the minutes of the last meeting. The Israelites had escaped the seemingly inexorable danger of the chariots of the Egyptian army, and then miraculously the sea divided and the Israelites crossed, and then the sea came back in and destroyed the Egyptians. The Israelites sang a song and finally seemed to be free when something untoward and unexpected happened. They were attacked by a new enemy, the Amalekites, a nomadic group living in the desert. Moses instructed Joshua to lead the people in battle. They fought and won. But the Torah makes it clear that this was no ordinary battle. Then the Lord said to Moses, "Write this on a scroll as something to be remembered and make sure that Joshua hears it. because I will completely blot out the name of Amalek from the under heaven. Moses built an altar and called it, "The Lord is my banner." He said, "The hand is on the Lord's throne. The Lord will be at war with Amalek for all generations." This is a very strange statement, and it stands in marked contrast to the way the Torah speaks about the Egyptians. The Amalekites attacked Israel once during the Moses lifetime. The Egyptians had oppressed the Israelites over an extended period, oppressing and enslaving them and starting a slow genocide by killing every male Israelite child. The whole thrust of the narrative would suggest that if any nation would become the symbol of evil, it would be Egypt. But the opposite turns out to be true. In Deuteronomy, the Torah states, "Do not abhor the Egyptian, because you were a stranger in his land." Shortly thereafter, Moses repeats the command about the Amalekites, adding a significant detail. "Remember what the Amalekites did to you along the way when you came out of Egypt. When you were weary and worn, they met you on your journey and attacked all who were lagging behind. They had no fear of God. You shall blot out the name of Amalek from under heaven. Do not forget." We are commanded not to hate Egypt, but never forget Amalek. Why the difference? The simplest answer is to recall the statement, "If love depends on the specific cause, when the cause ends, so does the love." If love does not depend on a specific cause, then it never ends. The same applies to hate. When hate depends on a specific cause, it ends once the cause disappears. Causeless, baseless hate never or lasts forever. The Egyptians oppressed the Israelites because, in Pharaoh's words, the Israelites are becoming too numerous and strong for us. Their hate, in other words, came from fear. It was not irrational. The Egyptians had been attacked and conquered before by a foreign group known as Hyksos, and the memory of that period was still acute and painful. The Amalekites, however, were not being threatened by the Israelites. They attacked the people who were weary and worn out, specifically those who were lagging behind. In short, the Egyptians feared the Israelites because they were strong. The Amalekites attacked the Israelites because they were weak. In today's terminology, the Egyptians were rational actors. The Amalekites were not. With rational actors, there can be a negotiated peace. People engaged in conflict eventually realize that they are not only destroying their enemies, but they are destroying themselves. That is why Pharaoh's advisors said to him after... Okay, well, I'm going to skip down a little bit then. I tried to get this... That's good. So there's quite a difference between remember and not forget, which is why we fully... so dividing the response, basically we're saying, why are we forgetting on one side, not forget and remember. So I'll get down in here into this. The birth of enlightenment, toleration, emancipation, liberalism, and human rights persuaded many, Jews among them, that the collective evil was as extinct as the Amalekites. Evil was then, not now. That age eventually begat nationalism, fascism, communism, 2 world wars, some of the most brutal tyrannies ever known, and the worst crime of man against man. Evil never dies, and, like liberty, it demands constant vigilance. We're commanded to remember, not for the sake of the past, but for the sake of the future. And not for revenge, but the opposite, a world free of revenge and other forms of violence. Can we overcome the forgetfulness that was the nemesis of every civilization? That is why we are commanded to remember and never forget Amalek, not because the historic people still exist, but because a society of rational actors can sometimes believe that the world is full of rational actors with whom one can negotiate peace. That is not always the case. Rarely was a biblical message so relevant to the future of the West and freedom itself. Peace is possible, implied Moses, even with the Egyptians that enslaved and tried to destroy us, but peace is not possible with those who attack people that they see as weak and who deny their own people the freedom for which they claim to be fighting. Freedom depends on our ability to remember and, whenever necessary, confront the eternal gang of ruthless men and the face of Amalek. Throughout history, Sometimes there may be no alternative but to fight evil and defeat it. This may be the only path to peace. And a couple of people I'll mention, Adolf Hitler, 6 million Jews, even more than that, Joseph Stalin, 20-some-odd million people of his own people, Pol Pot. There's a variety of other people that can kind of fall into that category.
And finally, last but very much not least, Alan Gillilla, speaking from the perspective of Richfield Community or Christian Church.
Yeah.
Disciples of Christ.
When it comes to thinking about evil from the Christian perspective, first of all, I will qualify and say that I will not claim to speak for all Christians. I am presenting a perspective and not the perspective. It's impossible for me to stand up here and tell you that every other Christian believes what I'm about to say on evil. There's too many denominations, too many conflicts between and amongst those denominations, and that's not even considering Protestantism versus Catholicism, which unfortunately we didn't have Catholicism represented today either. So what I'll just share today are some basics in hopes that we have a jumping off point. I think that one of the easiest ways to define and thus identify evil and the source of evil from a Christian perspective begins with the Adam and Eve story at creation. Humanity is created to be free, allowing choices in life. God does not force belief, force morality, or force will. And so it is in the story of creation with Adam and Eve. They are given the option to eat or to not eat from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. To eat of it would be to go against the will of God, to separate themselves from the presence of God, if only for a moment. In their choice, they went away from God. They sinned, and their eyes were opened to what such a choice meant. Evil in this instance, and to me in the world today, is that choice, originating within the human, that goes against the will of God, against the goodness of God, against the goodness of creation. Each and every one of us are free to make such a choice. And some in Christianity also believe that there is an active force that is tempting us to make such a choice. Known by many names, you heard a couple of them from Al-Sadiq, but represented in the serpent in the story of Adam and Eve. But that choice to go against God's goodness can be manifest in many ways, whether it is harm and destruction of creation in any form, causing suffering or strife of another, or even not being true to yourself and who you are created to be. Self, others, and the world can all be victims of evil perpetrated through the choice of one person. Facing and overcoming evil is a difficult thing, of course, but Jesus helps us to understand what we can do in the face of overcoming evil. In Matthew 5, we hear the words, "You have heard that it is said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth, but I say to you, do not resist an evildoer. But if anyone strikes you on the right cheek, turn the other also. And if anyone wants to sue you and take your coat, give your cloak as well. And if anyone forces you to go 1 mile, go also the 2nd mile. Give to everyone who begs from you, and do not refuse anyone who wants to borrow from you. You have heard that it is said, you shall love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I say to you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you, so that you may be children of your Father in heaven." Facing evil is simply to not resort to evil yourself in the face of it. In other words, it remains a choice for us to make, a choice to become that which we call evil or to be the change in that situation, showing that there is another way besides evil that one can take. It's easy to see passivity in this passage, but it's not that at all. It's making an active choice. It's doing something that enacts change in that situation. overcoming good with evil. Overcoming evil with good. I had a little dyslexia there. With the will of God. The problem in the Christian response comes in the misunderstanding of Jesus as passive, as not entering into the conversation or not doing anything but watching from the sideline or allowing someone to walk all over you. Many of us have heard a quote that's difficult to attribute. All it takes for evil to triumph is that good does nothing. I see this tying in extremely well to the Christian response or lack thereof in the modern times. Overcoming evil requires action, requires effort, requires a choice to search for the will of God, to search for goodness in all situations, and make that a priority in all conversations, all interactions, everything.
Can I ask one more time that we just say thank you to these wonderful speakers?